me. I have barking, so I'm gonna have to go deal with that in just a minute. I need to go ahead and sign on so I could, so people will see that we're on and give people a chance to get on. Say hello. How has everybody's day been? Today is Casual Thursday for me. And I wore this very special shirt in honor of our second debate that did not happen. I have to scoot up here so y'all can see it. Nobody's on yet, so I don't think anybody's noticing my cool shirt. All right, let's see if we are on Facebook. So we have one viewer, and Paul Brown should be signing on around 8:30. 1:30. Oh, way later than that. So I'm waiting for my oldest daughter to let me know when to go pick her up from the Woodlands High School because she had a football game. She's part of the medical trainer team, so she has to attend all the games. And so Nassim might join us, but then he's probably going to have to leave. So I hope if y'all are here to chat with Paul Brown, y'all have brought some questions about the mud. Paul Brown is the director of Mud 47 currently and is up for re-election in November. Typically their election would have taken place, I believe it was in May, but it was postponed due to COVID. So this is probably good, I think, for the mud election because I think a lot of people don't typically pay attention to those elections. And, you know, with their election being on November 3rd with the rest of the candidates, it's probably going to bring a lot more attention to the mud races than has been given before. We'll see what Paul thinks about that when he joins us. All right, so we are on Facebook. Say hello if you're watching. If you're watching, try to watch through my campaign Facebook page, the Elizabeth Hernandez for Congress, because I'm able to see the chat or the questions that y'all type through the platform that we're using when you post those questions on the Facebook campaign page. If you type questions on my personal Facebook page, I don't see them as easily. I have to go manually look at on my phone to see what has been posted. Okay, and I think Paul is coming on. Hello, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Let me turn up my volume. Maybe too low. All right. So I was just checking to make sure we're streaming live. It looks like we are. Yes. Okay, good. So Nassim may be joining us in a moment.
Who's joining us?
Nassim, my campaign manager. So we usually do this show together. So we talk on different screens. And we had one on Tuesday with Mike Midler, who's running for Commissioner Precinct 1, I believe. And instead of doing the two screens, he just joined me on screen and we talked to Mike. And so Nassim's gonna join us here. He may have to leave possibly to go get my older daughter from school, but wow, there's two people watching. Say hello if you're watching, and please type any comments that you might have for Paul regarding the mud, or Mud 47 specifically, so that he can answer them if you have questions. All right, Nassim's coming. Let me scoot over. So Paul, thank you for coming on with us.
Okay.
connection.
Looks like I lost a little bit of the stream.
All right, let me do something real quick. I forgot to do this before we got on. I don't think there's a lot of attention given to the mud races typically, and a lot of people don't probably know what the mud does or why people run for that office. So I wanted to bring you on so we can talk about that.
Well, yeah, I wish that more people paid attention to where their water comes from, and frankly, where their toilets get flushed to, and then the whole issue of drainage, which in this area of Texas is dear to everyone's heart usually, especially when it's predicted to rain 11 inches in 2 days, as it does here in Texas sometimes. But as far as the muds go, the muds are an entity that is responsible for three things essentially. Well, I'll mention four actually, but three major things now. One is the provision of fresh and clean water at your tap. The second is the handling of sewer water. Okay, in this community, we don't share outlets for sewer water, and in the streets, we don't share outlets for sewer water and rainwater. Okay, we have a three-pronged system, so that we don't overrun and clean water that is clean and can run off. Okay, a lot of places, they put it all into one system. It's a more expensive way to do it. But the muds do a couple of things. One is they price you water, and that price is largely driven by the wholesale cost of water, which is charged to us by our supplier, the San Jacinto River Authority. And we price against what they tell us they're willing to sell us water for. Okay, so that's one thing we do. We price water. And then the second thing we do is we set your taxes. And the major components of your taxes and use of your tax money is for paying off the debt. That's the debt that allowed the mud, in some cases 20 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it is, to pay the interest and principal on the debt that allowed us to establish the infrastructure, right, that you run on. And then the other thing that your taxes go to, in many cases, is depending upon the revenue streams and the needs, is maintenance. Okay, some percentage of your taxes may go for maintenance. It depends upon the particular mud, and there are 10 muds here in the Woodlands, and they're all a bit different. Okay, different primarily not in terms of what they actually do for the public, but different in terms of their financial statements, the debt that they have, if they have any debt. The mud I'm in, mud 47, has about 30 odd $30 million of debt. Okay, there are muds down in the Grogan's Mill area that have no debt any longer because they've paid off all the debt, and they may have a tax rate that's very low just to do maintenance. Okay.
So once that debt's paid off, the taxes go down.
Yeah, the taxes go down as the debt goes down usually, or they stay stable. Okay, because of the cash flow needs of a particular mud. It all has to do with a certain lifestyle in terms of development, right? Yeah, life cycle in terms of development. So every mud is different. In our mud, there's still property that is undeveloped. Not a lot, but there still is. So there are houses that can be developed, and there are commercial properties that can be developed. And the role of the mud is to facilitate for developers that that the sewer systems, the water systems, the drainage systems. Okay, so that's one function that the muds do. We do it to a much lesser extent than we did. What would it be, about 30 years ago when this mud was set up, mud 47. Any of the MUDs that are built out generally right now are not doing any development because there's no more land on which to develop. Okay. So I don't know if anybody who's on has questions about MUDs in general, or whether that might cover it for you. The one thing I guess I should add is that we have an entity that used to be called the Woodlands Joint Powers Agency, which I thought was a silly name and didn't exactly tell us whether we were, people didn't know whether we were an electric company, we were a gas company, we fixed people's cars, or we took care of water. So I went to, we have a board for that entity, which is our service bureau. And, I said, hey, could we have a name change and move to a name that's like Woodlands Water and Sewer? And they were like, well, we will consider it. Well, frankly, I fought for it for 2 years. It took them 2 years and 10 MUDs and 50 directors to make a decision that we would name it the Woodlands Water Agency. Okay, so we got 3/4 of the way there, I guess. So Woodlands Water Agency is our service bureau. So in some areas, MUDs are vertically integrated. Okay, in the Woodlands, the 10 MUDs, it used to be 11 or 12 MUDs, I think. I think we consolidated a couple that had no debt. But in the Woodlands, we do the oversight at the board level, most of the oversight, et cetera. And we have one entity that actually does the servicing of things like meters, drainage, changing out pipes, the relationship with San Jacinto River Authority on a day-to-day basis, all of the day-to-day operations that you would expect to have in a water company anywhere. Okay, and so we centralize that in one service bureau, and each of the MUDs takes an assessment every year that pays the expenses, the joint expenses related to carrying out those responsibilities. Okay, the MUD that I'm in is got about $10 million of revenue and expenses every year, so it's a reasonably large size MUD. We service about 7,500 customers in primarily the Olden Bridge and Cochrane's Crossing area, and I think we do that pretty well and very effectively. Now, any questions now?
So how often do the taxes change? Are they going to be every year or?
Every year.
Okay.
Every year we look at the first thing we do, obviously, is we've got to run the business for the next 12 months, right? Mm-hmm. If I want to call it a business. And so we go through the entire normal kind of process you would have in running a business, a $10 million business, right? At this point, $10 million. And so that's about doing projections on what every component's going to cost us of the activities that we fund. Okay, everything from cutting grass and that kind of thing, which we do, to advertisement, if we have to advertise, notices that we're legally required to put out, et cetera, et cetera. There's a list of probably 50 or 60 budget accounts that we fund, okay, on an annual basis. As we go through that process, we then do a cash flow and try and understand where's the revenue going to come from. In our case, in our MUD, we made a decision and have made a decision for over 8 years that I've been on the board, the 8 years that I've been on the board, to maintain our tax rate at the same level. Now, 3 years ago, yours truly stepped up and said, we have too much in reserves, right? Reserves are the monies that you kind of overpay and we either give back to you in a reduction of your taxes, or we hold on to and say, well, we want to become a city. If you live in the Woodlands, you probably are aware that there's roughly $25 million sitting at the township that's reserved for becoming a city, which, frankly, in my opinion, we never even asked to be. So we have these reserves, and what I suggested was that we installed the tool we have in the state of Texas to give people a deduction for their homestead. Okay, and so 3 years ago we put in a homestead exemption, an exemption level for people under 65, and an exemption level for people over 65 and disabled. Okay, now the effect of that is dependent upon obviously the assessment of your home, but we figured that it approximately created a 14% decrease in people's average tax rate. Now that's not precise because everybody's house is different, right? And we all know, the assessments happen every year, but it changes, right? So I mean, that's how we do. That's really the story on taxes here. Obviously, over time, our taxes will start to decline. Simply because we won't have to pay any debt anymore. That's the big issue, I guess, that'll bring taxes down. Now, the other issue is that, San Jacinto River Authority has recently told us that in a report they gave us that, everything's getting older in the woodlands, right, and including our mud, and that they expect to have to spend roughly upwards of $200 million to repair, replace, equipment that could be pump stations, that could be piping, et cetera, in Mud 47. Okay, so, we have a committee working at the Woodlands water level of our directors to try and figure that game plan out, okay? But my view is that, we live in a great town. We have a great water system and sewer system. And as they found out in places like Flint, you want to spend the money to have core services, core infrastructure up to date and operating properly, right? So one way or the other, those kind of dollars, give or take, are going to have to be spent over the next 10 years, according to our suppliers.
So buying water, how does that work? I'm just curious. I mean,
does it work?
Sign a contract for the next year, or is this monthly, or is it always fluctuating?
Well, we get a quote for the next year.
Okay.
I mean, typically that's how it happens, right? And there's the give and take over a variety of inputs in our conversations with San Jacinto. Okay. Now, one of the things that, as most people might be aware of, there is there's an argument over our aquifers and the future of our aquifers that actually have, for now, a lower unit cost to get water out of the ground. So going into our aquifers and pulling water is a little bit less expensive than using a facility that the community committed to 10 years ago, which was a $500 million processing plant for water at Lake Conroe. Okay, and that was built primarily to do two things. One was to preserve the aquifers, okay, and aquifers can run dry. At least scientists tell us they can run dry. There are people in the community who don't believe in science and don't believe that the aquifers are going to run dry. Okay, well, any of us who have a pail, okay, if we fill it and we keep taking water out of it, unless it rains and it fills completely, the balance is going to go down. Okay, and typically that's what happens. In our area, as many of us know who have houses and yards water does not travel quickly into the ground beyond about, in most places, about 6-7 inches. Okay, there's a layer of clay that, and you'll see it in your yard. It pools water, right? And you'll say, I'd like to go and play with my kid in the yard, but the water still hasn't gone down, right? That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the permeability of our substrate, right? I grew up on Long Island in New York, and Long Island in New York is, for the most part, sand. Okay, it's an island and it's sand, and so, I used to play golf in the rain on Long Island on great golf courses like the Beth Page courses, and I could play in the rain, and it was like almost playing without rain, because the water would come down and it goes right into the ground, right? You can't do that here in Texas. No, not in this area of Texas anyway. So as far as the pricing of the water, like I said, that's negotiated with San Jacinto on an annual basis as we work through budgets for the next year.
Now on the question, just a comment, playing golf in the rain, with those wet greens can make you look like a pro, the way you can back the ball up and work the ball.
Well, you're absolutely right. If you're somebody other than me. No, that's not true. I can occasionally back up a ball, or used to be able to. But it's a lot easier to play after 2 inches of rain on Long Island than it is to play after 2 inches of rain on the Palmer Golf Course. I can tell you that. I can tell you that. So anyway.
So I'm guessing, at the end of the year, you're looking at what your revenues were, your expenses are, and you're seeing, what you're going to project for the next year, and that's how you're making your determination on the tax increase or decrease.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's two components, obviously. There's fees you pay for your water, okay? And that's largely driven by the price that we pay San Jacinto. And then there's the taxes, which are used to pay off debt, and also to, in certain cases, be allocated to maintenance.
So I have a question on water bills because I see this a lot. Like 1 month my bill's $50, and then the next month it's another crazy amount, and I'm like, I haven't really used any different amount of water. Do y'all actually read the meters every month? Is it estimated?
Yeah, so there's a couple of inputs, right? I mean, obviously, if you take showers, you don't take showers. I mean, that's one input, right? I mean, sometimes but it's hot out and you go take a shower 3 times a day, right? But the real mover in the woodlands is usually watering of lawns and watering of bushes and trees. That's the huge variability. Okay, now let's step down to something that I championed, which was the whole issue of our infrastructure. Okay. Most of our mud has, and most of the woodlands has the meters that were put in here as these villages grew. Okay, so Grogan's Mill probably has a lot of meters that were replaced already with old technology, or the original technology, and places like Alden Bridge, where I live now, or Cochrane's Crossing, where I lived for 25 years, those areas, their equipment is starting to wear out, okay? And one of the things I noticed, I guess it was a couple of years ago, was that my bills were doing what you said. They were moving. And it was strange. And so I raised it with our head of Woodland, what's today called Woodlands Water, and I asked him to do a survey. And he went out, and first of course, what always happens is they tell you, oh no, everything's running fine. But our job is oversight. And so if I'm seeing it, and I know how many showers I take a day, right, or don't take a day, whatever the case may be, I I have a gut for it. And I said, well, let's do a survey. Let's go out and actually survey customers. Let's look at performance and let's see what the variance is. And we actually did find meters that read at 98%, okay, which is a tolerance level that's pretty acceptable in the water world for mechanical meters. And then we had folks who, properties that had meters where at times it would only grab a reading of 64% of the actual use, okay? So clearly that wasn't huge, but it was a problem. It showed us, or pictured for us, I guess, a real negative future in terms of accuracy and fairness, and most often fairness, right? I mean, you and I, if we live next door to each other, you shouldn't be paying 60% of what I'm paying, right, as your neighbor for the same water, the same volume. Anyway, the long and the short is that we talked through this in our MUDs, certainly, and eventually in all the MUDs, and we came to the conclusion that it made a lot of sense for us to renew the infrastructure. And so then the argument becomes, do we have guys go around the streets and open up meters and take manual? And I said to myself, I've been in technology, I've been in general management and touch technology and run technology for years. What we really should be thinking about is a store and forward system that's digital, where we can have the actual meter gather the data through a period of the day. Let's say 24 hours with a time when we set it up to forward the data read via the internet, right? You put it up in the sky, you move it on to the internet, to a server, over the internet to a server. You store it in a primary and secondary server for security, and then you make it available, right, ultimately in a format that's appropriate to our customers the next day. So they can actually see, I mean, if what they like to do is look at their water use, they can look at it every morning and say, wow.
You can catch leaks that way.
Exactly. Well, but you get to another issue. So the guys who go around and have to actually drive trucks that or if they're outsourced, who do that work, okay, we don't need to pay for that anymore, okay, because it's done electronically. The second thing that happens is that we're just starting this project, but we will be contracting with the vendor that we're using who provides this environment, this operating environment, to have utility, okay, meaning software components that do exactly what you say. We can look at Elizabeth's water every day by setting limits, right? We can set limits and say, okay, Elizabeth typically uses, 100 gallons a day, okay? And all of a sudden, Elizabeth's using 300 gallons a day, whatever that high point is that we want to set. And if we exceed that, or we hit it and exceed it, we have the ability to then say, okay, what's going on in Elizabeth's house, right? She's over, we can make a phone call, we can send you a text, we can call you on the telephone, whatever we want to do to, preempt your call to us and water being wasted that perhaps you don't even know about. Maybe you have a broken sprinkler head, okay? And probably all of us who live in the woodlands have had that kind of thing. Or you've got a toilet that's running, or whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of obvious things that can happen. Sometimes they're as simple as somebody has a pipe break in their yard, okay? And it starts running. I mean, pipes do break, soil moves, somebody puts a shovel through one when they're working in your garden, whatever. So those kind of tools are the kind of tools we want to be able to use to make things more efficient, and to save people the aggravation of realizing, oh, I've got a problem because I see it on my bill. No, we want to be able to step out and say, hey, your usage has gone up over the last 3 days by 40%. You've got a problem, okay, somewhere on your property, and we want to work with you to fix it. Okay, you know, I was in business for 40 years, big corporations, startups. You want to reach out to customers. I mean, and rather, you know, it's very expensive when a customer calls you, right? You gotta take care of that. It's a lot less expensive and more satisfying if somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, Elizabeth, you've got a leak, we think. Can you walk outside and see if you have any obvious water, right? Water leaking, water going in the street, whatever it is." So that's a good way to, I think, proceed. That's going to cost in the Woodlands probably about $23 million by the time we're finished. And a lot of that payback is going to come from savings. Most of it is going to come from savings.
So is that going to be implemented in 47 only right now that you're aware of?
No. Actually, it's going to be implemented in all of the MUDs over the next year and a half or so. And we've started with the first MUDs already. And we actually started before we even approved the entire project. If you look at some of the meters, you'll see a white cap on them. Those are meters that we identified as having problems, so we installed a digital system in that meter, a digital head, and those are already they're already ready to be migrated to this new system once we have it up.
Ah, okay. So I want to talk a little bit about incorporation. How is that going to, you know, affect the MUDs? What does that look like?
Well, I think it was close to about 18 months, 20 months ago. If you recall, I may have the dates wrong or my remembrance. I mean, I try and keep things in my head, and I get older, and they don't seem to stay in the right component of my brain. But the township management wanted us to were considering whether it was viable to become a city or not. And they paid somebody an enormous amount of money to do all these studies of functions. One of them was MUDs and water, and it was recommended by their own consultants that they not acquire the MUDs. Okay, as there used to be a song called "Along Comes Mary." Along comes Corona, right? And the township is only really funded at about 50%, give or take, with taxes. Mm-hmm. Okay, they are funded primarily with, different hotel taxes, sales taxes, et cetera, et cetera. The hotel portion was a huge portion for the community, and that has dropped by Gordy Bunch's recent public statements, 70%, okay? So if you got a 70% loss of revenue, and coronavirus, frankly, isn't going away, and even if they were able to give us all shots by the end of the year or early next year, this is not, the impacts of coronavirus are not going to disappear in a week, a month, or a year. It's going to be multiple years. I mean, I've been in business a long time as a senior executive, and things don't turn around that quick, right? And so there's a need to get revenue. And who has revenue? The MUDs have revenue, okay? But what happens with the MUDs today, the MUDs only use the revenue, whether it's fee income or taxes, on water and sewer and drainage issues and to pay off debt. And so, but it represents a good source of additional funding, potentially, to the township, who is going to need funds, okay? And so their attitude towards acquiring the MUDs has, as if by wizardry, changed. Now, I would suggest that in any city that I'm aware of, from New York City to much smaller cities, they have a budget, and they have a pool of money that they raise, and they have water departments, and those water departments charge fees, et cetera, in different ways. They market bonds in many cases, and they market debt, and they add that repayment back to their tax rates, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when your money from something like the MUDs, okay, was to go into a city, that money becomes fungible, okay? It's all like water. It's all wet. It all looks the same, okay? And the city now has the ability to spend that money wherever they choose as they set up their budgets. They don't necessarily have to say, no, we've got this issue over here with meters that we need to pay for or replace or plan for the replacement of and fund. They don't have to commit 150 or $200 million over 10 years to the replacement of, if you will, plumbing. I'll call it plumbing of various kinds. They don't have to use what we use. We tend to look at, and San Jacinto does too, when they look at the life of an asset, they look at it's what they call in the business mean time to failure, right? So how long is your car going to last? Well, some people could say, well, my car could last 20 years. Other people might say, well, no, I'm not comfortable with that because I have to drive to work every day. So I think a reasonable time to replace a asset that can fail is only 10 years, okay? And so we call that, most of us call that mean time to failure. So we use that as a target, plus or minus, okay, because life isn't perfect, but plus or minus we shoot for mean time to replace mean time to failure. We use that criteria to replace infrastructure, okay? In a city, they don't necessarily have to do that. They could turn around and say, we've got more important things to do with that water, with that money from the water side of our city, and we're going to wait for something to fail. We'll replace it when it fails. They could do that. And so, that's a huge consideration, I think. The second big consideration, I think, is the whole issue of taxes, right, and debt. In this community, many of our MUDs have retired their debt. So pick the area, some of the older areas of the Woodlands, okay? They've retired their debt. So they have very low debt, if no payments at all, really, of taxes, right? They may have a tax rate, they could have a tax rate of 10 cents, and only to fund, maintenance stuff. I mean, I don't know the intimacies of 10 MUDs, frankly, in their balance sheets or income statements. But the point is that, so if you live down in Grogan's Mill, okay, and you have very low taxes, and you live up in a place like Sterling Ridge, which has much higher taxes and has debt, okay, in a city situation, they're going to have to assume all of the debt, okay, of the entire 10 MUDs, whatever that debt happens to be. And then what they'll do is they'll mix it all up. Again, it's fungible debt, and it will become basically the responsibility of everyone. So if you had no taxes in MUD before, but you were somebody who had taxes, well, your taxes, if you're in a situation where you pay higher taxes, your taxes are necessarily going to go down, right? And the people who have no taxes to pay today, their taxes are going to go up. It's just, that's the way it's going to work. They may tell you it's not going to work that way, but, as they say, promises, okay? So those are two of the biggest things. Then the third thing that really needs to be called out is that the MUDs work, okay? So I did mergers for JP Morgan, actually for Chemical Bank, who I joined out of college and ended up being called JP Morgan because ultimately we acquired them. And so I did the Texas Commerce acquisition. Okay, that's how I got to Texas. We acquired Texas Commerce in December of '88. I did the Manufacturers Hanover acquisition. I did the Chase acquisition, and then I decided that I was going to leave the bank. You know, I was able to, as they say, cut one of those great golden handshake deals and get back to my family because I was working in New York, flying back and forth, and I wanted to get back here to the Woodlands. But one of the things that most people are being told today is that it'll be so much more inexpensive to have the MUDs incorporated, but also incorporated into a city. And frankly, both of those things will have some savings, but they're insignificant, okay? So if you do away with all the MUDs, the only money that goes out in the MUDs, in the boards, is there's an allowance, so they give you an allowance of $150 for what somebody might call a meeting, okay? Well, so that's $15,000 a MUD a year. There's 10 MUDs, it's $150,000. Well, if you look at what the MUD directors do, okay, like in my case, you get, you're getting an experienced executive, okay, who has perspective in business and has I have broad-based skills in everything from data processing to accounting and corporate finance to customer care, et cetera, et cetera. I've run businesses pretty broadly. You get those kind of folks who volunteer in our community to do this. They're not working for $150 and they don't spend 1 hour doing it. Every month I spend time reading everything that I receive prior to a meeting, okay, and that can take me, depending upon the volume, 2 extra hours. And then frankly, because I live in the community, I actually go out and look at projects because I want to know what they're doing. So, when Del Webb went in, okay, Del Webb sits on the border with MUD 47, okay? Myself and 3 other directors went out there multiple times. Some of the directors, our president and one of our vice presidents on the board, they went and did active meetings with Del Webb, okay? That's, you can't buy their expertise and their time, quite frankly. So when you talk about $150,000 a year for all the MUDs, you are going to have someone from the outside of the city who does what we do. And you're going to buy that body at an executive level for at least $150,000, maybe more, quite frankly, because you
get $150 for a meeting?
No, $150,000 a year.
But that's for all of the MUDs.
All the MUDs, right. Well, your total cost for the 10 MUDs for the director's position is at $150 a meeting, right? It works out to be $150,000 a year, let's say. Now, actually, that is what it ends up costing. But if the city takes the water, the MUD function, which is a control function, it's going to easily cost them $150,000. So that's a false argument in my mind. I've done this kind of work. You can't just eliminate expertise, right? You have to have oversight. So then the second thing is that you also have to have everything in a department, okay, what we call our service bureau. You need all the kinds of people you have in Woodlands Water to run the operation day to day, okay? And the only thing there that is redundant to anything else in the county is the tax department. And the tax department, I believe, employs a total of 3 people, okay? And it provides water service, it provides services around their taxes, people's taxes, to MUD, Old 10 MUD's taxpayers, okay? So they can go over there and discuss their taxes, they can make a phone call and get service, et cetera. We did an evaluation about 3 years ago, and we compared our cost to the county's cost, okay? And the difference that they quoted us, okay, as an operating expense was pennies, basically. Okay, we said, well, we will move, because there were people telling us, well, why can't you consolidate that? And we said, we can consolidate that. But right now, we know what it's going to cost us for the next 5 years, okay? Easily know what it's going to cost us for the next 5 years. We'll do that if they will give us a contract price that they're willing to commit to in terms of cost for that same 5 years. And they were unwilling to do that. Why? Because they're subject to the political process of budgeting in the county, okay? Mm-hmm. So we could sign up and say, okay, so the price is the same, and find out that the next year it just doubled, okay? Why would we want to do that to our ratepayers and our customers? Right. So that's one that you could get rid of, but ultimately you're going to be paying the same dollars, or maybe more. Other than that, there's nothing else that goes away, okay? The other thing that needs to be considered is that we have a contract and we do business with San Jacinto River Authority. San Jacinto may decide that, hey, it might be good for you guys at the township to acquire these guys, but we don't want to do business with you the same way we did business with the MUDs, okay? Now, they haven't discussed that, but if I was San Jacinto, I might say, you know what, maybe I want to redefine this relationship. And I want to redefine against what kind of service you want us to provide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another big open issue, is will San Jacinto say, well, we're dealing with the city now and we want a new contract. Mm-hmm. Okay? So those are big issues related to what I think, after 8 years working on the MUDs as a director, what I think about when people talk about this thing called incorporation and acquisition of MUDs. The other thing I'll say is, these guys don't know how to run a city. They're running a township that basically runs on a model called outsourcing. They outsource everything, okay? And they have a city manager to run things, okay? The first thing they have to do, and we all could just go back and read their analysis done by their consultants, what they have to do is they've got to set up a police force, okay? Okay, and that police force has to train police. It has to have the capability to train police. It has to have the ability to hire police, right? It also then has to take over whatever, or provide whatever kind of medical coverages and pensions that are required to actually be competitive in the market. They have to buy equipment that currently is used by police in the county to, have mobility, okay? So they need to do that. Then they have to set up a court system. We don't have a court system. They have to have judges, okay? They have to have a jail. There's a whole, there's a whole host of things that, when you get down to, brass tacks and start putting down the detail, the answers are very different when you get down there, and the complexity is different, okay? I have started with others very successful businesses, and it's not easy, okay? It's not easy, especially in a complex business. The last one I was in, we basically changed the face of check processing in America. Okay, we created a digital archive. We had 85% market share among the top banks in America within 3 years. Okay, we processed 100 million images in an 8-hour period into an archive.
Wow.
Okay, that was working with very difficult customers. I mean, I can easily say this because I don't want to go to work for them anymore. I don't have to. But, you know, working with big banks like, you know, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, US Bancorp, et cetera, you know, those aren't always, you know, easy relationships to manage because they all have different interests and they're all smarter than each other. And you're in the middle of that conversation, as you can imagine, right? So it's a very, you know, the complexity can't be overlooked in setting up a city. And my view of that is, guess what? Become a city, and then if you want to acquire the MUDs, let's have the conversation then, once you've proven that you can actually run a city.
So I was going to ask, is it possible for us to incorporate and not acquire the MUDs and keep them separate? So you kind of just...
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. There's no reason for them to acquire the MUDs other than, in my mind, control, okay, which they seem to be big into control, and cash flow.
So how is that decision made? I mean, is that something that's going to be presented to the voters on whether they're allowed to acquire the MUDs, or what's that process?
Well, my understanding is that, well, let's step back. Before they can acquire the MUDs, they have to become a city.
Yeah. And
the old rules were set aside, I don't know, I think it was 2 years ago. I'm not a lawyer, but, and like I said, my brain sometimes is taxed with dates, but I think it was about 2 years ago, the law in the state of Texas changed, and there's a requirement that any community that wants to become a city, okay, needs to run an election, okay, and put the question of the city, the choice of the city or no city, to their voters. Okay, so this whole bugaboo about you know, the city of Houston, that's really gone. Okay, because as you know, you've been around. Nobody in the Woodlands is going to vote to become part of the city of Houston. Okay. So then it becomes, do we want to become the city of the Woodlands? Mm-hmm. And, you know, that requires a plebiscite. People have to vote for it. My gut is that, you know, I know I wouldn't vote for that. Because when I look at the Woodlands, I've been living here 32 years, going on 33 years. What's wrong with the way things work right now? Why would I want to take the chance that the folks who want it, and want it for reasons that I don't really care about, which is power and a lot of other things, why would I want to put myself in their hands in a different structure? Okay, I don't think will pass myself. But you know, I mean, I didn't think Trump could get elected, but you know, was I allowed to say that?
Oh yeah, of course. You can say whatever you would like. I totally agree.
Hey, I grew up in New York. I knew who he was. I knew where he lived. I went by his house every day. Wow. So, what can I say?
I didn't get to show you my shirt because you came on after, but how my shirt.
Well, by the way,
I wore it in honor of our debate that we didn't have today. Between Biden.
Yeah. Well, Biden was pretty effective. I watched a bit of it. I thought he was doing a good job. I mean, the guy's got a level of competence that the other guy doesn't have, you know, so.
Yeah.
You know, but everybody in New York knew what he was. I mean, you know, New Yorkers would give you descriptions that we couldn't discuss here of his credibility, capability, et cetera. You know, so anyway. What else would you like to talk about?
You have shared so much great information. I've been very interested. I've learned a lot. Yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit just about your election. because, we're talking about how people don't pay attention to it. So I know your election was supposed to take place in
I'm sorry, you just broke up.
COVID, I believe. I said your election was supposed to take place in May, delayed, right?
Right. The governor moved all elections to November. Okay.
So how many? I know there's several people on the ballot. Are there only a certain number of positions open? What's that look? What's your
Yeah.
approach?
Well, it's basically, I think they refer to it as an at-large election, basically. So there's myself and 3 other candidates running for 3 seats. Okay.
Okay.
So the way it works is whoever gets the most votes, or let me put it a different way. He or she who gets the least votes doesn't get elected to a position.
Got it. Okay.
And so why should people vote for me? Okay. And I think people should vote for me because I have an awful lot of broad-based business experience that I bring to a business environment that's fairly complex. So that's number one. The other reason is because two of our electors, our board members rather, have retired in the last 7 months. One had over 30 years working on the board, okay, from when he first moved here, when the Woodlands was basically, much, much smaller than it is. And the other fellow had done 3 terms, and he's on I think the library board and the design review board. And he just had too many things on his plate, and his wife told him, I want to know the woman you're out with. It was one of those deals where she wanted him to come home occasionally. You know what I mean? So this, I guess the second reason beyond experience elsewhere is experience on the mud board. I have the most experience. I'm there 8 years. I actually hadn't intended to run if everybody else was going to stay, but I figured, well, this is a board that needs some depth beyond just 4 years or even a shorter period of time. Someone who has no experience. Okay, and so that's why I think people should vote for me. Aside from the fact that I have a certain perspective around water. Okay. And I really see that there's a few really important things that are important going forward and over the next term, which is 4 years. One of those things, which is the whole what's going to be a heated dispute, I'm sure, about becoming a city and acquiring MUDs. Okay, that's going to be an issue, and there's a need for leadership there. I've been a leader all my life in business. So that's one of the things. The second is the whole issue of water for the future. Okay, this county is looking at growth, depending upon whose pro formas you believe, of getting to probably the county somewhere about 1.6, maybe 1.8 million people in the next X number of years. Let's say I think the last one I saw was 20 years, next 20 years. Well, you got to have a hell of a lot of water to support those kind of households and businesses, all right? And that makes and if you believe the science and the scientists who tell us the aquifers are being depleted, then that means you really can't go back on your vision of 10 years ago. You got to advocate for it and believe in it, that we really need to use water from surface water from Conroe, okay, clean it and distribute it. And while it costs a little bit more, and it does cost a little bit more, as everybody who's been getting water now for quite a number of years found out, it costs a little more. But guess what? It's important that we embrace it, and we embrace the future of the community if we care about the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that. And I believe that what happened and what created this problem was just pure politics. Okay, the Tea Party wanted to take over Lone Star. They took over Lone Star because they were smarter than a lot of other people, quite honestly, and they had the political connections, and they were able to go through those political connections to make it a elected position as opposed to an appointed position, and they got out their people to vote. Okay. It's as simple as that. We were sleeping in the woodlands. Okay. We were sleeping in the woodlands and in most of Montgomery County, frankly. And they have the ability to set the limits of how much, where the water comes from that we use. Okay, let me put it that way, without getting into the detail of it all, which is pretty esoteric, frankly. But, that's, from my standpoint, it's going to be critical to have leadership. Now, there are 3 people running for the board, okay, 2 of whom have no experience in MUDs, okay. I believe one is an attorney or training to be an attorney. I'm not sure about her credentials. And the other one, the only thing I know about him is that he espouses the Tea Party belief that we should not spend money on anything. Well, frankly, I would like to do that too, only spend money on myself. But, you have to spend money on everything from keeping your house up to feeding your kids to sending them to school, et cetera. That individual showed up at our last board meeting last month when we set the new tax rate, which wasn't a new tax rate. We just maintained the same tax rate, and we also voted to continue the homestead exemption. And he begged us not to. He begged us. If you watch the video, he actually said, "I beg you, okay, not to raise your tax rate." And and he said, my reason is because the township they lowered their tax rate, so you should too. Everybody is doing it, okay. And I sat there and said, how disconnected is this individual from what taxes are used for? We don't raise or lower people's taxes because we have a personal belief. We raise or lower people's taxes and have shown that we haven't raised taxes in at least 8 years now, because we're physically responsible and we have run an effective MUD. Okay, and this is not a religious issue. I mean, in my mind, you don't just lower, you just don't lower your taxes because that's what you believe, is that no one should have to ever pay taxes. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so, that's one of the reasons why people should vote for me. The second reason, I guess, is because, we need experience on the board. And I have the most experience, and I think it needs to be there. I'm not saying that at least a couple of others with or without experience shouldn't get elected, but this is not a role that you just learn in a year or two. I mean, it's a complicated business, believe it or not, and you need to come to the table with, as an independent voice. And I'm an independent. I'm doing this not because I have to do it or I need that $150. I'm doing it because I've been a resident for 32 years. I had free time. I was back in Texas, and I didn't like something I saw going on, which had to do with the way we financed that $500 million facility. I thought it should have been put to the voters. I also thought that it should have been done at the time with municipal bonds as opposed to revenue bonds, and the impact of that is a municipal bond, you get to write it off on your taxes, right? We can pass it through as a tax. You then, depending upon your marginal tax rate in the old tax law, you could then get the deduction and basically not pay a dollar for a dollar. So if you're in a 25% tax bracket, you get a break, right? Mm-hmm. On your taxes, if assuming, of course, that you itemize. But the new tax law has kind of mitigated that, obviously. for most people because of the levels of deductibility. So those are two of the big issues, I guess, that I think about. You know, and I've been pretty prudent in terms of trying to also take my expertise and my willingness to, you know, to argue for prudent change and prudent expenditure, okay? And I did that in a very large corporation, JP Morgan Chase, what's now called JP Morgan Chase, through change management, which is what I did for, at least 18 of the 25 years I was there. So, you know, those are the things that I really have thought about. We talked about the city. That's obviously something that is critical. And somebody needs to be there to argue that we make the expenditure of the $150 to $200 million that San Jacinto tells us we need to do. I mean, that is going to be an argument, okay? It may not be a loud argument, but somebody needs to be there to say, okay, let's get down to the detail. And so what happens if X breaks, right? So to give you an idea there, so you've gone up and down Kirkendall and seen the work going on there, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's one of our major sewer lines that's being redone. And that's costing somewhere in the neighborhood, I'll round it, $20 million, okay? Now, that needs to be done because, God forbid, it breaks somewhere. Lots and lots of people wouldn't get the sewerage out of their houses, okay? That would be a mess, what we call a mess, right? So it wouldn't last terribly long. We would figure out a workaround, and we would put in temporary piping, and we would do what we had to do in the woodlands, okay? And that services more than just our mud. It services multiple muds, multiple areas of the woodlands. But nobody wants to see that happen. And you know, I was involved in that discussion, and I said, well, mean time to failure. When could this break, okay? And no, I mean, that's going to impact Paul Brown and his ability to flush his toilet over a couple of weeks, right? Or maybe more than that. Because as you can see from the work, this is a big job, right? Nobody wants that. So you really do need people with some vision and willingness to also argue for the tough things. It's really easy to cut people's taxes. It's really easy not to spend money, okay? Yeah. This shouldn't be a political job. This should be about, do I get clean water every day? Can I flush my toilets? You know, am I being flooded? And if I have a flood condition, are the people responsible fixing it? Okay. You know, our current regional flood group is headed by the township, by Reeser. Okay. And, you know, I remember reading in the paper when that committee was organized, he said it would take at least 15 years to study the problem. Okay. I said to myself, if I ever told anybody I've worked for in my life that something was going to take 15 years to study, they would have fired me. Okay. And by the way, they would have been right. I mean, it didn't take 15 years to put somebody on the bloody moon. I was there, 1969. I was 18 years old, and they got to the moon on IBM computers that you have more computing power in your house, I bet, than those IBM computers, right? So 15 years, really? These are the people running a township?
I was going to ask you about flooding and, you know, what role the mud plays in that, if any.
Well, we are responsible for drainage, okay? And so I can only speak for our mud, but we have spent, I think last year we spent about $1.2 million changing up certain drainage capabilities, okay? Some of them actually, one is above where I live, okay? And there were some that were west of me in my community that just happened to be there that we what these were they weren't terrible mud. They weren't terrible drainage issues, but they were creating problems for people. And it was really a simple change in both cases, relatively simple, not inexpensive, but it's about opening up more room for the water. I mean, this sounds silly, but opening up more room for the water to move through the drains that we all see on our block, right? So you might see one, you might see two. A lot of these we had to open up to three, okay? So that we could move the water sufficiently fast enough and so that it didn't back up. Okay, in certain places. We've done it here. We've done it over in Cottage Green, I believe. We've done quite a number of places around the Woodlands. So, but as far as regional drainage, that's really in the hands of a committee that...
Uh-oh. You grabbed my laptop charger? I wonder if his phone died. We lost Paul. I don't know if he'll try to join us. Yeah, we'll wait a few minutes and see if he hops back on. I'm wondering if his phone died. Well, I have found this conversation fascinating. I've personally learned a lot. Unfortunately, I don't live in Mud 47. I actually live in Mud 46. But if I did live in Mud 47, I would most definitely be voting for Paul Brown. I think his election slogan should be, elect Paul Brown so you can flush your toilets. Well, we didn't have too many viewers tonight, but I do hope that some of you that live in any of the muds in the Woodlands will watch this later because it's great information.
Is he back on?
Not yet. My computer's dying, so I haven't seen go get my charger. I was waiting a few minutes to see if he would. I bet his phone died. Just thinking. Or computer, I'm not sure what he was on. Well, while we're waiting a few minutes, did anything come across the news or anything by chance? Oh, there we go. Paul's coming back. Did you die on us?
Yeah, I did. I knew that I was that old, and yes, I'm dead. Can you actually hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I figured your phone or your computer died because mine was slowly about to get there, but I plugged it in.
It gave us a chance to plug in, so it all worked out.
Okay, well, I found a plug and a line, so I don't know how I can make this bigger, but...
Well, I can see the top of your head.
Yeah, by the way, it's so attractive. It's got, well, it has the least lines. So anyway, I see children wanting to go to bed, and maybe I don't know whether this has been enough of a conversation. But,
yeah, it's been really, really great. But I think this is very, very important, and I shared it across, several of the groups that I'm in, and I hope that, those that weren't able to join us tonight will watch it. I will definitely encourage everybody to watch it. And, I don't live in Mud 47, so I unfortunately cannot vote for you. But if I did, I would absolutely be voting for you.
Okay, well, you know what? I mean...
And I will encourage everybody to vote for you. I said this when you were offline. I said, I think Paul's campaign slogan should be, elect Paul Brown so you can flush your toilets.
Well, you know what? I hate to say it, but this is not, like I said, this is not religious, okay?
Yeah.
Everybody wants clean water. Everybody wants to see it come out every day. They all want to be able to flush their toilets, and nobody wants to get flooded, okay? And so it's a pretty simple, straightforward job. It's just, there are people who want to, I don't know, over-politicize it, to be very frank. It's very important. I mean, one of the most important things I think, in the community is water, okay? Getting rid of it, and not letting it get in your property. So, anyway.
Well, I thank you so very much for your time. This is Lila. I think she wants to say something.
Hello, Lila. How are you, Lila?
This is my 5-year-old. She's in kindergarten.
She came to tell us there's only a few more days before the election. So.
Well, there's more than a few. More than a few. You can always feel free to say Paul Brown. Vote for Paul Brown.
Yeah.
There you go.
But you're 5, right? So are you doing classes, or are you doing it online?
She is going to school.
Yes, school. Yeah. Masks and face shields and.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandson attempted to do school today at my kitchen table, and has attempted to do it in the past, but he has a penchant for playing with his toys, which are nearby.
Yeah.
And for some reason, they put him into a class that in the morning is Spanish only, and he doesn't speak Spanish.
What?
Yeah. And afternoon is English, and so it's kind of a challenging do. He does speak a little bit of Spanish, but so it's a challenging environment.
Well, maybe he'll learn Spanish better.
Exactly, that's what I told him.
Okay,
anyway, so we call it a night, or what?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So,
and I am encouraging everybody to vote for you, and I'm so glad that you were willing to come on and talk about the mud position and just
everything.
Talk
about the area of his
A
little bit Alden Bridge, but yeah, just go ahead and restate, because I think a lot of people don't even know what mud they're in. So I know you said Alden Bridge.
Well, this is Mud 47 generally covers all of Alden Bridge and all of Cochran's Crossing.
Okay.
Okay, that's a generalization. I mean, there might be a street or two that fall into different mud.
But I know you can basically check your water bill to find out, right?
You can check your water bill, or you can go to Woodlands Water's website, and you can find out there what mud you're in.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you so very much, and good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
I have a good feeling you're going to win.
Well, good luck to you. I voted for you on Tuesday.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, Paul.
No problem.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.